Good morning. I'm Kathy Scroggs. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. And on behalf of the University of Missouri and the Lecture Series Committee, I want to welcome you to the third Christopher S. Bond Lecture Program. Thank you to those of you who are joining us here in the Bond Life Sciences Center today. At the University of Missouri, we foster a highly collaborative culture, and the continued evolution of technology provides us with exciting opportunities to supercharge that collaborative culture and share events like today with other members of our global community. With that said, we invite you to tweet along with this presentation today. I'd ask you to use the hashtags fall semester, one word for those of you that aren't too used to tweeting, fall semester, no spaces, and Mizzou. We have 2 graduate students from the Truman School of Public Affairs live tweeting, and we will have some time later to take questions, including those that have been submitted via Twitter. So this is exciting for us to, again, use technology, not just to make this a more engaging lecture here in this room, but around the world. With a wide array of resources and expertise, all located on the same campus, MU does things that no other university can. By focusing on real-world problems, our collaborative networks secure external funding, recruit top students, attract prominent scholars and scientists, create jobs, and improve the quality of life in our state, in our nation, and even around the world. This morning, you're going to hear from one of those leaders, but first, I have the privilege of introducing to you our Chancellor, Brady Deaton. I would note that this is the eve of Brady's retirement. This is his last day with us and maybe one of his last public appearances. I told him earlier, I'm not going to read your vita, Brady. I'm just going to say this is the leader of the University of Missouri, the flagship University of Missouri, an AAU public research land-grant institution in Missouri. And so as he comes to the podium, I'd like you to welcome him, and will you thank him for his service to our state and to our community. All right?
Keep getting surprises. Thank you. Well, this has been a day of wonderful surprises and honor, and Dr. Scroggs, thank you very much, and thank you for the leadership you've provided in this Christopher Bond Lecture Series. I welcome all of you to the campus of this great university, and from the time that I first met our guest, Raj Shah, today, I've had the good fortune to be able to share with him the concept of the Bond Center, and it's my honor this morning to simply introduce the person who will introduce the person you're here to see, and as Dr. Raj Shah. And we're going to ask our senator, very beloved Senator Kit Bond, in whose building here we stand, and has brought great honor to our university after serving 4 terms as a senator for the state of Missouri, serving 2 terms as governor, and one of the, I think the youngest governor in history, Senator Bond. And you have continued to bring illustrious pride to us as a university. As many of you know, Senator Bond is now chair and partner with the Kit Bond Strategies and Thompson & Coburn Public Finance and Public Law Firm. He's a fellow board member of the chancellor of this university on the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center board also. But Senator Bond is devoted to world peace, world technology relationships, has done tremendous work, and is an author of very prominent works that address some of the most fundamental issues we face in the world today. And it's always a pleasure to be in a program with him, and he brings real distinction to us. And let me also thank the Truman School for co-hosting this event today. Bart Wexel, you'll hear from later to honor the Truman School and this lecture series. Senator Bond, thank you for being with us, and to introduce our major speaker here today as well.
Thank you very much, Brady. Thank you for your kind words, and good luck. Thank you very much, Dr. Deaton, Brady, for your very kind and generous introduction, and thanks to all of you who are here today. It is sort of a mixed feelings. that we have Brady here on his last day. When Dean Scroggs predicted this would be the last time we'd hear him in a public forum at the university, I said, nah, he'll be back because Brady has done too much for the university over the years. He served not only as a liaison with NSF or USAID for the university, but other land-grant colleges around the country, and has been a leader in international efforts. And he's had a tremendous impact, for which we thank you, Brady. We're going to miss your leadership here on a daily basis, but I have a feeling you're going to continue to contribute to the students in the university for a long time to come. And also, as I will second what Brady said about the Truman School and Dr. Bart Wexler for all their help under his guidance. He made tremendous contributions to fostering civil democratic discourse, something that used to happen in Washington, D.C., doesn't seem to happen much right now. And when somebody tells me, do you miss it? I said, yeah, like an abscessed tooth. But Dr. Wexler and his school are preaching discussion, compromise, and civil discourse. The students here at the university can become policymakers by following the model of the Truman School and by putting events like this together, like the Bond Lecture Series. The Truman School is ensuring students here on campus and the university community writ large the opportunity to hear and learn from the top and brightest leaders in our country today. And I am very proud that one of those true leaders, Dr. Rajiv Shah, is our featured speaker today. In his current position, he serves as the administrator for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and before that, he served as Undersecretary of Research, Education, and Economics, and the Chief Scientist of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And at USDA, he launched the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. At the urging of Dr. Bill Danforth in St. Louis, I joined with my colleague, Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, to promote NIFA, to develop breakthroughs in innovation in agricultural research. But under Dr. Shah's leadership, NIFA has impacted the lives of thousands of Americans, but also hundreds of thousands of people abroad. They have provided funding to enable scientists to conduct critical projects, providing support for local cooperative extension offices nationwide, which make the connection between research in the laboratory and application in areas of need in local communities. Before his service in government, Dr. Shah worked at the very prestigious Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he led the foundation's efforts to increase agricultural development around the world, tackling challenges of food security and poverty. There are a couple of constants in his career, if you look at it. First, he's a true public servant. He's dedicated his life to improving the lives of others. He is, as a scientist himself, dedicated his career to using science, technology to help the world's poorest people with global issues like the need for clean water, food security, child mortality, HIV, and malaria. If more young people follow in the steps of Dr. Shah, there's real hope we can find solutions to many of these problems. Before turning it over to Dr. Shah, just a few words about USAID. It doesn't get the glory on television because providing food and water is not nearly so colorful as flying in helicopters and dropping water out, or bringing in either battleships or aircraft carriers, but it provides a very important component of our U.S. foreign policy and security policy. It's the chief way the U.S. government provides humanitarian aid to people in need throughout the world, and it has thousands of people working in 80 missions across the road. Right now, they are working in the Philippines to help recovery from the tragic typhoon that impacted the Philippines. People in less developed nations are suffering right now, some of them for natural disasters and some of them from their own government and government-imposed problems. But wherever there's a need, USAID comes in with medical care, food, assistance, clean water, sanitation, and hope. And USAID is working to make sure the communities are viable and more able to take care of themselves, fend for themselves. So development of those areas around the world where people need help is one of his main focuses. So with that, would you please welcome with me the head of USAID, Dr. Rajiv Shah.
Good morning, and thank you, Senator, for that very kind introduction. As a generous host, a generous introduction, and an extraordinarily accomplished role model as one of America's top public servants, Senator Bond has been a champion for science, for technology, for innovation, for American leadership around the world, and for this great state. And so it's an honor to be speaking at a lecture that bears your name in a building that you helped create and envisioned, and in a context where the type of leadership that you modeled for so many years is too often missing these days from Washington, and we sort of wish you'd come back. So thank you very much, sir, for the opportunity to be here. I also want to thank you, Dr. Scroggs, and Dean Wexler for hosting me today. It's a great honor to be at this institution, and it's been a really special pleasure to get to know Brady Deaton over the last several years. As some of you may not know, in addition to leading this great institution, Brady has served as the chair of USAID's Board for International Food and Agricultural Development, always serving as a voice for ensuring that we use our capacities as the federal government to engage and inspire and rely upon scientists in American colleges and universities and students who want to play a bigger role in helping to tackle pretty fundamental challenges around the world. And Brady, I'm honored to be here on your last day in service here, but I also know that your service will continue through the Brady and Ann Deaton Institute for University Leadership and Development, and your service will also continue on the BIFAD board. So thank you very much for the chance to be here with you. Yeah, I do want to open this morning with a few words about the devastating typhoon that Senator Bond made reference to, one of the most potent storms to ever hit populated land. You know, while the toll of the destruction in the Philippines is not yet clear, we know that more than 1,800 people have already been confirmed dead. And we know that nearly 150,000 homes have been completely destroyed. We know that the human costs of this are both unmeasurable and incredibly tragic. And we know that the United States, as has been our practice for more than 6 decades under Republican and Democratic administrations, is leading an international response with more than $20 million in immediate humanitarian assistance already at work, reaching families on the ground. Just in the last 24 hours, we've helped to reach 10,000 families with basic survival kits and supplies. More than 20,000 children are already receiving U.S.-supported food and nutrition support. We will be, in the coming hours and days, expanding access to water, and our teams are already on the ground trying to engage private partners in the Philippines and around the world to restart basic systems of infrastructure in water, in energy, in getting the hospitals stocked and supplied, and in getting critical personnel into the region. And you know, it's times like this when I am just in awe of the capacity of the United States, its institutions, its government, and its people to stand with those who suffer from unspeakable tragedy. I had a chance to learn from Al Dwyer, who's leading our response on the ground after he completed a series of overflights with Brigadier General Paul Kennedy, and they shared their joint assessment of the damage. He said in 15 years of assessing catastrophes like this, he's never seen anything that felt so complete and so tragic in terms of the devastation and the loss. And it reminded me also that American ingenuity and innovation and technical scientific capability is also important. What you don't see in the press today is that over the course of the last week, week and a half, because of much more effective and advanced early warning and prediction systems, mostly from American satellite imagery and American meteorological assessments, we were able to both predict this coming, put disaster teams in place, and help the government of the Philippines evacuate 792,000 people from the danger zone. And so as tragic as what is unfolding currently is, the human consequences could have been much worse had we not been engaged in a deeper and more effective effort. It is at times like this that I also am amazed by America's generosity. More people gave directly out of their pocket to the earthquake response in Haiti than watched the Super Bowl. And that's a point of pride, because I grew up thinking the Super Bowl was the one thing that brought us all together as Americans. And so, if you think about that, it's truly extraordinary, and I'd like to use this opportunity to let you know that if you are inclined to provide support, the best way to do that is through cash donations to any of the credible organizations that are already on the ground and working. We know that those donations will be used effectively, and you can go to usaid.gov and you'll see a range of options, not to give resources to the United States government, but to the organizations that are on the ground that we're working with and that we partner with to make sure those resources reach those in most need. In many ways, this history of American engagement around the world, combined with the moment we live in, creates both challenges and opportunities for us today. And this is an institution that recognizes that American innovation and scientific and technical leadership has always been a major part of how America engages around the world. And in fact, I'd like to argue today that we're strongest and most capable when American innovation sits at the heart of how we project power and partnership to the farthest corners of the globe. Now, I don't need to explain that in an institution that is just so capable and already so engaged, whether it's early warning systems that help us predict droughts and floods and typhoons and bring people to immediate safety, or plant and agricultural research that helps to create the basis of climate resilience, food production, and move people out of hunger and poverty, or mobile phone and information communications connectivity that allows hundreds of millions and billions of people who 10 years ago were simply not connected to the global economy and were not on the list to get a telephone line by land anytime soon, to today be vibrant and connected economic partners in a rapidly expanding global economy. American technology and American innovation has always been at the heart of how we engage around the world. Just this morning, touring the Bond Science Center laboratories, I met Mizzou researchers and students that are at the forefront of the next phase of discoveries that can enable all kinds of progress. And I suspect many of you are part of these research programs already, whether it's developing drought-tolerant seeds or new advances in the fight against HIV/AIDS and that tragic disease. These advances, if commercialized and deployed, particularly in the parts of the world where people are most vulnerable, create the opportunity to do some extraordinary things. We can envision wiping out extreme poverty, extreme child mortality, and some ancient diseases that have been around, like malaria, for a very, very long time. But in the process, we can also invest in and build a development innovation economy right here in the United States that gives our students and researchers and entrepreneurs a chance to make a living, create employment, and jobs, while also being in service of our foreign policy goals and objectives. And in fact, throughout our history, our thirst for translating knowledge and scientific advancement into economic opportunity has always shaped our own domestic economy. I'm honored to be at a land-grant university, I think the first one created in the American West, and to know that that land-grant system created by President Lincoln in the midst of a civil war has helped to reshape the American economy and create the basis for the export of great American agricultural technologies that have helped hundreds of millions, some estimate more than 1 billion people, avoid hunger and modernize the structure of their societies. The race to the skies helped build a constellation of satellites that provided the data we used last week to help move hundreds of thousands of people out of harm's way in the Philippines. And the invention of the computer chip and the ARPANET, fundamentally a public-private enterprise, helped create a flourishing valley of entrepreneurs throughout our country, but in particular in Silicon Valley, that have demonstrated to the world that it's possible to envision an entirely different future, profit from it, and also make sure that it reaches the farthest corners of the globe quickly. But today, our innovation economy must expand and change even more rapidly to an important emerging new trend. And that trend is that the middle class around us is changing dramatically. For centuries, less than 1% of the world's population enjoyed the privilege of a little bit of extra money in their pocket. By 1990, the global middle class numbered about 1.8 billion people, but still mostly living in North America, Europe, and Japan. Over the last 2 decades, growth in emerging economies has turned billions of new people into producers and consumers, creating both opportunity and challenges for the United States. By 2025, the global middle class is expected to more than double, growing to 4.2 billion people, 80% of whom live in nations often associated today with their battles against poverty and instability rather than their economic might. Nations like Nigeria, Tunisia, Colombia, and Cambodia. As this center of gravity shifts, it's going to have a tremendous impact on the futures of American Fortune 500 companies, but also on the careers of Mizzou students. As entrepreneurs, you'll be seeking footholds in cities we haven't spent a lot of time talking about today, like Medan in Indonesia and Wambo in Angola. As agronomists, you'll be seeking partnerships with research centers in South Asia and Africa, as those are the places that both have the world's remaining arable land for agricultural development and will face the biggest pressures of climate change as it relates to global food production. As journalists, you'll be analyzing the experiences of developing countries that have risen for what they can teach us about how to grow and expand economic opportunity here at home. You know, American companies, of course, already know this. And one of the things we've been proud to do over the last several years is change the way we work to partner with dozens of large and small U.S. firms to make sure that we conduct our development mission abroad in a manner that helps to both create new markets and bring U.S. capabilities to places where it's most needed. In a partnership with Citibank, for example, we're building mobile money platforms to bring hundreds of millions of new customers into formal banking systems, including in places like rural Haiti and even today in the Philippines. If you consider that every $1 billion in U.S. exports supports roughly 5,000 American jobs today, estimated export growth to sub-Saharan Africa alone over just the next 5 years will create 60,000 new American jobs. Now, I really don't need to tell you this because you're studying in one of our nation's leading centers for technology, and hopefully you're laser focused on getting those technologies adopted and deployed all around the world. I just learned that Mizzou has filed 278 patents in just the last 5 years. I also understand you invented the tradition of homecoming, which I was not aware of, And as a Michigan fan, I'm glad you didn't patent it. I do believe that if you commit yourself to what you do best, in whatever discipline you're studying and you're focused on, you can have tremendous relevance to this kind of exciting global future. In September, I had the chance to meet some of the new faces of American innovation in development. At a factory in Providence, Rhode Island called Adesia, for example, I met 50 employees. Some were former refugees from Liberia and Burma. And they were making a high-energy peanut paste and a product called NutriButter that we now procure and distribute to families in Somalia and the Philippines, and every family of the 4.2 million people inside of Syria that receive relief from the United States receive these NutriButter packets because it keeps them healthy even when they don't get enough calories on a day-to-day basis. What's remarkable is that this factory didn't exist 10 years ago. New American science coupled with USAID's procurement systems helped to create that mini industry of advanced food products for emergency relief settings. And the other thing that's incredible, and Senator Bond will appreciate this, is the entire Rhode Island delegation, as Senator Bond knows is only 4 people, joined me there because they're excited by the prospect that we're now creating those 50 new jobs, and they're rapidly growing their own employment base with this new approach. Today we work with dozens of companies across the United States, usually coming out of university partnerships to commercialize new technologies, ensure we reach consumers in the farthest corners of the globe, and create jobs at home. In fact, small businesses, as we know, account for almost 2/3 of all new job creation, and they contribute disproportionately to innovation, generating 13 times as many patents as large companies. So we are excited to be here at Mizzou, where you have efforts like the Entrepreneurship Alliance and the Student Angel Capital Program that are really trying to create a culture that will seed new ideas and new businesses that can help do extraordinary things abroad. So I do want to note that in the last 3 years, the United States has been able to build a strong bipartisan support base for our work in global development and humanitarian relief. In fact, at a very difficult political time, we've been able to rebuild USAID as an institution, bring in nearly 1,200 new staff, focus our program work so that we work in about 1/3 as many places as we used to, but we do it in a more focused way that allows us to reach more people and deliver better and more prominent results. Some of those results are quite profound. In just 3 years, we now reach 7 million farm households through our Feed the Future program, providing them agricultural technologies and insights and helping them serve at the forefront of building self-sufficiency so they can transition from food aid and assistance to a vibrant economy based on a strong agricultural system. We've also tried to invest more in enabling the kind of technology innovation that we're talking about. In fact, we recently concluded our 3rd round of a global technology competition called Saving Lives at Birth. And this is an effort to inspire young people in particular, but really anybody, to invent new tools and technologies to save lives in the first 48 hours of a child being born, often at homes, not in medical settings, around the world. After 39 winners and nearly 1,500 proposals, nearly 40% of which came from the developing world itself, we know that these types of new inventions, one of which is a new form of forceps to enable safe delivery, is featured today on the front page of the New York Times. We know that students across this country, working with researchers and administrators, can develop great new technologies that could be commercialized and deployed very, very quickly and save a tremendous number of lives. So we're pleased today to be able to announce that we're going to expand our partnerships with the University of Missouri in particular. I'm thrilled to be able to note that our new Feed the Future Innovation Laboratory for soybean research will involve a partnership between the University of Missouri and the University of Illinois. And we're excited to see, hopefully, new products and technologies come out of this partnership and reach our beneficiary farmers in places like Ethiopia, Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. And this will, sure, this will build on a strong track record that we've had of working with scientists and researchers here, and I hope serve as a platform for even more collaboration and partnership. I'd like to close with just a reference to a statement that President Obama made in last year's State of the Union address. Earlier this year, at that moment, he called upon the United States to help lead the world in ending extreme poverty in the next 2 decades. And it was an extraordinary moment as the president set forth a vision for one of the greatest contributions to human progress in our history. Now, I know it's easy to be skeptical about such a grandiose objective or claim, but I'd like you to consider this, that in the last 20 years alone, human ingenuity and entrepreneurship, new science and new technologies around the world have helped reduce child mortality rates by 42%. And $1.25 poverty rates by 48%, lifting nearly 1 billion people out of a condition of extreme poverty. Many have said, well, that's a phenomenon largely tied to the emergence of China and Brazil and India, and there's a lot of truth to that. But in 2005, something else changed. For the first time in history, these extreme poverty rates started to fall in every part of the world, including in sub-Saharan Africa. By further accelerating these trends, we really think it's possible to achieve these goals. A world without extreme poverty, a world without widespread child hunger, a world where 6.5 million children don't die every year of simple diseases that have been around since the beginning of time. And the only way we can really get there, especially in our new environment of significant fiscal constraint, is by asking you to partner with us more aggressively and more actively. If you're a scientist or a student, think about committing yourself to research projects that can contribute to these goals. If you're a faculty member, come and look for grants and research support that can tie your NSF or NIH-funded awards to ideas that can help achieve these objectives around the world. And if you're an entrepreneur, think about how you might be able to build a business that starts to rapidly commercialize and sell new technologies and new solutions in some of the farthest corners of the globe, even as you think about building your business right here at home. As you do these things, you'll be creating jobs and opportunities and a better educated workforce here in the United States, but you'll also help us build a more stable and more prosperous world. And so I'm pleased that USAID is now prepared and able to support you in these efforts. And I'm convinced the only way we'll achieve these goals that have been laid out by President Obama, but echoed by all of his predecessors, is if we hold hands and do this work together. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and I look forward to taking some questions and hearing your thoughts and your ideas. Thank you.
I'm Bart Wexler, Dean of the Truman School of Public Affairs, and the idea for this segment of the program is to really engage Dr. Shah in a conversation. So our hope is that we'll have an opportunity to explore the ideas which he enunciated in his remarks, but also explore other questions and ideas that come from the audience. So please, if you have a question, there is a microphone behind you, or if you want to speak from there and I'll repeat the question, that would be fine. So go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
In Colombia, South America, I've been working with funding from USAID and other international agencies with projects to help vulnerable population. And when we work there and your funds just finish and the project finish, these populations don't have follow-up from organizations like mine. And they come back for the baseline, maybe for illicit crops sometimes. My question for you is, what is the strategy to make these projects sustainable for these communities? And thank in behalf of my country for your help.
Well, thank you. We've worked hard to make these types of efforts more sustainable. The number one strategy we've employed to do that is to expand the role of public-private partnerships. So, for example, I was with Howard Schultz of Starbucks just recently. We launched an effort to reach 25,000 coffee growers in Colombia in a partnership with Starbucks. They will focus their efforts in those parts of the country that are emerging from conflict and where people can be repatriated to their land. And in doing so, and in the hopes of creating more economic opportunity in rural communities, hopefully accelerate some of the contextual drivers of the peace process that is currently ongoing and that we are quite optimistic about in Colombia. But it's important to have those kinds of private sector partners because ultimately, governments really can't sustain these things forever. Whereas if you can connect 25,000 farmers to a global supply chain for which there's a robust market, and I probably had 3 cups of Starbucks coffee this morning, then you have a sustainability path that can last for many decades. And that's really the effort we've tried to take around the world with a broad range of our programs.
Dr. Shaw, at the end of your comments, you said if you have an NIH or other grant, we can help you. Now, what does that mean from USAID?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, and thanks for your existing work and leadership already. We have created a program called the PEER program, which allows us to, when you get an NSF or NIH award, it allows us to provide support in developing countries to allow researchers and research institutions there to be part of those research projects where that's appropriate and where that's something you seek. So if you have an NSF award or an NIH award to work on microbicide research or improved agricultural research, and it would be useful to you to have an international partner, we can move relatively rapidly to provide resources to those international partners to collaborate with you through the NSF or NIH award. And it's been a program that is just becoming more widely known and one that many researchers have been very excited about, the first 50 or so that have been part of the effort.
Yeah, my question is about the technology you talked about. I think you're right in identifying that some of the GMO technologies will help with drought resistance of our traditional crops. So my question for you is, there are a lot of non-traditional crops or underutilized ones, as you know, whether it's amaranth, quinoa, millets, some of the legumes that don't typically get a lot of attention in the big international development efforts where we get focused on some of our major commodities. I'm wondering what you see as the potential with some of those, like an amaranth, for example, that can help with maize-based diets to balance the nutrition and help with malnutrition. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we think those are very, very high potential. In fact, we had the BIFAD board that Brady has led very ably review all of our agricultural research investments. And under the Obama administration, we've more than tripled our level of financial support to agricultural science as a big part of the solution for global hunger. And we're pleased that the board came back with a pretty concrete set of recommendations about which crops to focus on and which institutions to look to leverage their expertise. And these collaborations, I think, increasingly have those kinds of multi-crop partnerships. So, resources are not plentiful these days, but we are trying to do our best to ensure that we unlock as much expertise as possible towards the goal of ending hunger around the world.
As a Peace Corps volunteer serving in Zambia, I had the privilege of working with USAID on a few different projects throughout my service. And you spoke of bringing technology to the global south, increasing technology to the global south. And something I didn't have the opportunity to experience while I was working with USAID, but I wanted to know the degree to involvement that they're engaged in this, is culturally appropriate technologies for those who are living below that $1.25 that you're talking about.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your service in the Peace Corps, and thanks for that question. at the end of the day, as Senator Bond, as we were walking through the center, kept asking everybody, it's like, so where does this technology go from here? How does it get used? How is it going to be deployed at scale so that it actually changes the world? And when you start asking those types of questions, you run right into the point you raised, which is how do you ensure that the technologies are appropriate for the environments in which they're being used? And I think that's the central question in this process. And so we try to identify and focus on traits and characteristics and product profiles that are appropriate for those settings. That's why, simply taking American plant genetics and providing them in other parts of the world are not going to work. But having research collaborations that can take some improved varieties and adapt them for local context and conditions can then create the kind of huge gains we're starting to see. In Ethiopia, for example, we're now reaching 70,000 farmers in a public-private partnership just in the last couple of years, and we've seen them have big increases in their maize or corn yields because they're using improved hybrid varieties that were developed in partnership with American scientists and Ethiopian scientists. And that I think is how you develop appropriate solutions.
I enjoyed this very much today. I learned something with Ken's question about the potential for essentially piggybacking NIH and NSF grants. One area that's become apparent to me over the last few years is that an area of agriculture that's not getting much funding, at least international funding, is the area of essentially of herbal medicines. All right, 50% of our drugs in America originally came from herbal medicines, and the idea that the rest of the world, 80% of them, which use herbal medicines as their primary source of medicines, that there aren't any more drugs potentially to be discovered within those is quite small. NIH had a small little fledgling program that was pushing international type research, but they've essentially pulled back on that. Do you know about collaborations with USAID, which were the focus is essentially to economically develop plants grown around the world to essentially be drugs for export, all right? And presumably that could benefit the whole world. But it would be a two-way street where essentially well, I don't know. So the PEER program, I'm curious of examples of the types of things that have been funded that you just mentioned earlier. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of direct expertise on herbal medicines. I would note there are some examples like artemisinin, which is, as you know, a component of modern malaria therapy, which is a plant-based compound. And we're now investing both in efforts to expand the production of artemisinin so there's more high-quality, low-cost product available around the world, and investing in synthetic artemisinins that can help alleviate the supply constraint created by the lack of available artemisinin in general. I'd note that that's part of a malaria program that is one of the most extraordinarily efficient efforts the world has to save lives. We spend something on the order of $600 or $700 million a year through this initiative called the President's Malaria Initiative, and independent third-party reviews have shown that that specific effort has helped save approximately 235,000 children's lives every year under the age of 5 in Africa. There have been entire communities where you'd visit hospitals that used to be overflowing with young kids with fevers that today have the capacity to take other kinds of patients because those kids are sleeping under bed nets and getting simple community-based therapies. And in my view, it just goes to show that we spend, for everything I'm talking about, we spend well under 1% of the federal budget on foreign assistance, and it can sometimes be an extraordinarily efficient way to make the world a better and safer place.
That particular example, there's a pure compound that's been isolated from the Artemisia. All right, it turns out that the crude mixture works much better than the pure compound. So that and we don't grow it here, of course. It's a foreign grown
right.
drug, but that's really quite wonderful. But it's an example of the potential for this whole area to be expanded. And I'm saying is NIH has not been putting money into this, because it doesn't quite fit with what they want to do. But perhaps it should be, is what I'm trying to make the case for. Okay.
Good, thank you.
There may be somebody here who knows more about this than I do, but one of the things that I was quite impressed by was the partnership that the University of Missouri has with researchers at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa, exploring the potential of indigenous plants as for medical purposes. There may be somebody here who can elaborate on that. I think I found someone.
Dr. Folk, Bill Folk, from biochemistry. He was the principal investigator of a very major grant that involved scientists in South Africa, and of course here at the University of Missouri. And that involves a clinical trial. It's still going on, I believe, with some.
I believe Bill is there now in South
Yeah, he's in
Africa,
South Africa,
but for different sorts of funding on a different project. All right. This is the NIH program I was talking about that was fostering international studies on that, but that program has been canceled. And so clearly it's a tremendous promise because of what they had found. All right. So
Good.
this that's why the double plug. Okay.
Thank you.
Triple, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
Not that our grant wasn't part of the whole program.
Yeah.
We did great, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pat Westhoff with the Pamper Group here on campus. Want to hear more about what you think about the evolving role of social scientists might be in helping AID achieve its mission?
Sure. Well, thank you. And at the end of the day, the goal for us is reaching scale and having impact with all of these different efforts. And social science has been critical to ensuring that takes place. In our Feed the Future program, for example, we studied carefully why do certain farmers not buy fertilizer. Some of the answers are economic and relatively straightforward. Others have to do with the anthropology of the areas in which they live, their prior experience with contaminated product, their risk profile and what determines whether they're willing to make financial outlays to take more risks, and how can you mitigate those risks. And unless you really understand those concepts, it's very hard to see these wonderful efforts reach millions and millions of people at once. And so I think we're very proud of a partnership with Missouri and the School of Journalism that is helping to ask and answer some of those exact same questions on the particular issue of how do you get improved beans to women and children and families where there's a large, high degree of protein malnutrition related to their production systems and their environments. And those are the kinds of things we'd love to continue to work together on.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm actually wanting to see if you can talk a little bit about the MOU that you signed with the City of Los Angeles, USAID signed with the City of Los Angeles, which was an anti-gang initiative. And also, I was wondering if you can, let us know what are some of the steps that the international community are doing to foster that innovation that you were talking about in youth, so that they can, strengthen their economy.
Sure. Well, thank you. The MOU you're referring to with the City of Los Angeles, I think, is a good example of how American innovation is not just plant science, which it is. Mayor Villaraigosa in Los Angeles had a very data-driven and scientifically validated approach to identifying what were the drivers of gang-related violence in the city and what were things they could do at very low cost to help dramatically reduce that kind of gang violence. And they have a whole system in place for collecting data, doing the analysis, trying programs, testing those programs, and restructuring or scaling them. And it was highly, highly effective. So as part of this push to say, let's find what's innovative and effective here and partner around the world, we worked with the City of Los Angeles to tackle similar gang-related violence and crime issues in Central America, in El Salvador and in Honduras and in Guatemala. And it's been very, very effective. And we found, this is a partnership we engage in with the U.S. military, and what everyone's been shocked by is that a very, very small expenditure to help reach at-risk youth in a targeted way that's driven by the data of who's at most risk and what that looks like on a map, has been probably the single most effective way to reduce rapidly crime and violence in these communities. and has made a big difference for not just crime reduction, but also allowing more economic activity. The number one constraint to economic development in these communities has just been the level of crime and violence. So we were pretty proud of that partnership, and we're always looking to find those kinds of opportunities to build those science-based partnerships in all of the walks of our work. In terms of how we can engage more young people, maybe being at a university, I should ask you to help answer that question. We're trying very hard. President Obama is very committed to the basic idea that young people have almost a greater degree of hopefulness and commitment to tackling these challenges than perhaps other parts of the population. And so we'd like to find ways to support students on campuses to come together and connect to our work. It's something that I've asked the BIFAD board to think through and propose some ideas. We've seen some great models. We helped launch a series of development innovation laboratories on college campuses, and we've seen some great models where with a small amount of resources, universities can hold sort of competitions and students can apply. And what we find is the students will do most of the work of identifying programs and projects abroad. And if they have a faculty sponsor, can get some credit for it and a way to apply to a university pool of funding for some small stipend, they can have an experience that is often a big part of their education. So I don't know if that exists here, but I hope you'll develop something like that. And we're actually looking to how we can support those kinds of programs much more broadly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, Simone Dietrich from the Political Science Department. Thank you for coming, Dr. Shah. And I was going to follow up on the first question about the sustainability of these development efforts. And in your answer, you were primarily focusing on public-private partnerships or entrepreneurs. And I was wondering what the appropriate role of the public sector is in the developing countries in terms of making these development initiatives not only compatible with what USAID wants, but also sustainable from a long-term perspective, and which then raises the point of a much more systemic solution to development that may move beyond these emergency need development goals.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Simone. That's a great question. And at the end of the day, in order to sustain these efforts, and frankly, in order to launch larger scale public-private partnerships, we know that the number one constraint to private investment in the communities where we work is political and administrative risk related to poor governance. So we can often play a role of mitigating that risk by asking governments to implement certain types of policy reforms almost as a precondition for seeing expanded foreign direct investment in certain areas. Some examples include, we launched something called the New Alliance for Food Security in sub-Saharan Africa. We worked with 6, now 9 countries to have them detail a set of policy reforms that include fighting corruption specifically, but also include, changing their seed distribution laws or their recognition of capital or the process by which they approve capital transport through customs and clearance systems, just very mechanical things. And what we find is when they're willing to make those changes and when we can stand with a country and ensure those changes get made, we can then unlock a lot of private investment. And in that case, we secured commitments from nearly 70 companies for $3.6 billion of investment in these agricultural economies, which is compared to almost no private foreign direct investment in agriculture in those countries previously. So we've seen real successes, but it involves real public sector reform coupled with real private sector reform. The next big frontier for us with that basic approach is power and energy, where the world is in the midst of an infrastructure and energy deficiency crisis that is constraining growth and development in many, many countries. And President Obama launched an effort called Power Africa this summer that's fundamentally about countries reforming the way they manage their power sector, inviting in the private sector, and then are working with American companies and institutions like the World Bank and African Development Bank to motivate billions of dollars of new investment. And we have a very specific goal to create 10,000 megawatts of new energy generation and distribution on the continent within 5 years, and we think we're on track to do that.
I think we have time for just a couple more questions, and we've got two people at the mic, so let's go here first.
Good morning, Galen Supis, Chemical Engineering. If you take a look at the history of the U.S., about 1910 to 1950 in particular, we went from an era where a lot of horses were around and not many automobiles, where there was not much electricity available, and we had a very prosperous and sustainable society, a great land of opportunity. This was during a time when the technologies were not proven. These are new technologies. This was without aid from another country. When I was a young man, I guess I was rather naive, thinking by the time I would be as old as I am that a lot of these countries would be like the U.S. It hasn't happened. There seems to be a fundamental issue that countries like Mexico, a lot of the citizens still want to go to the U.S. for opportunity. In Africa throughout, there seems to be problems where they have not done what the U.S. did very well. What are certainly I hope you have thought about this very same thing. What are those fundamental issues that stop other countries from doing what the U.S. did so well?
Well, I think the fundamental issues are, as you're likely alluding to, governance, rule of law, basic transparency around allowing a private sector economy to flourish in a way that raises all boats and is inclusive as it brings about growth. But I would push back a little bit on the concept that it's not taking hold. If you look, 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa. Most of the emerging middle class and new consumers that will be brought into the world over the next 15 years will be in countries today that a lot of people believe are challenged with stability and poor governance, but actually they are rapidly growing and are rapidly creating governance systems that are more stable and more effective. If you look at the tremendous spread of electoral democracies over the last 20 years, you've seen a major shift in the way the world governs itself. Of course, our press and our attention is always going to be focused on crisis and concern. That's what drives media imagery. But underneath that, I mean, the folks who are out there trying to run big global businesses or trying to tap into huge new markets or just trying to create solutions that can reach hundreds of millions of people who have not previously been connected to a global economy know that those future markets are rapidly emerging. And in fact, the reason I think USAID's been successful at changing its business model to engage much more with private firms and investors is that they know they want to hold hands with a partner who can help them succeed in contexts that we might have traditionally thought of as just difficult places to work, but they know are part of the most rapidly growing economic environments on the planet.
Good, thank you. One last question over here.
Administrator Shah, thank you so much for being here today. Kara from Plant Sciences. So as you may know, 1/3 of all food that's produced is wasted, either before the market or after the market in developed countries. And I was wondering how USAID is trying to tackle the issue of food distribution and how that plays out in aid and aid policy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Look, I think at the end of the day, global food security is so tightly correlated with economic prosperity, fighting and ending poverty, and creating the basis for stability in many regions all around the world. And I think more people recognize that than ever before. And as a result, we've dramatically increased our investments in these areas, but we've also increased our large-scale public-private partnerships. And almost every country that has dramatically reduced the amount of food that's wasted in supply chains and food systems and dramatically improved its own agricultural performance and GDP growth in the agriculture sector has done it through embracing a strong role for the private sector. commercial stores, tied to professional supply chains, tied to large-scale production systems that can reach the poorest of the poor. And so that's why we have prioritized efforts like this new Alliance for Food Security that are about let's take the 70 companies that know how to professionalize food systems everywhere in the world and ask them to bring their capabilities to places where doing that will actually end significant levels of poverty and create the kind of stability that can keep our country safe and prosperous into the future as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Shah, thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for your good questions. Dr. Shah, you last two questions, you hit on something that I have seen throughout the world as more and more countries realize that the model of American government with electoral democracy, human rights, and free enterprise, that is the model that more and more countries are following, and a lot of them still have a long way to go, but they're on the right track. But let's give Dr. Shah a round of generous applause. This has been terrific.